Hi everyone, what's good? What's good? Welcome back. You're watching Dia Dash, where we dash deception. And just like that show with the real world, remember that, guys, from back in the day, where people stop being polite and start getting real. And I'm going to do a quick vid, guys, because too busy today. And just because of some of the vids I put up, I've noticed that on BitChute, I don't know how much more people are aware of like history being all a damn lie from the way they taught slavery and on, like everything's a deception. And on BitChute, some people I think forget that because that's why we're on these forums, because everything is a darn deception, and that's why we have to do our own research, and we're trying to help each other and edify each other. So I'm going to put you guys on to two channels that's helping me do my research, because I'm on the path to finding out my real lineage, because all the names they gave everybody is totally fictitious, literally. Okay, so this whole black, white, this, that, I mean, that takes away your ethnos, that takes away your nationality, that takes away your lineage, your inheritances rather. But you understand, like, so when they detach you from your history, then they make everybody a so-called United States citizen, which basically has no rights. That's like the lowest place on the totem pole. In this so-called system. And so I've been on the path with a lot of great teachers who have been putting me on to stuff. And there's a lot of books, because when you try to talk about so-called any type of slavery, people want to look at it in like black and white images, like the colonists weren't so-called melanated people, like in a lot of these regions, like the Turks, who have taken white women, white little boys, as slaves for many reasons, if not for sex, for labor. A lot of people have been sent here who had noble origins, have been reduced to indentured servitude. You're only supposed to serve, or slavery was only supposed to be for 7 years, and now people are working for 50 years and brag about it, and people think slavery went somewhere. They just renamed it. More people are in jail than anything. Yeah, there's a certain group of people which are dubbed the real American Indians. That's like a whole topic about America and the land. So for those who are melanated that watch this stuff, the original Mexicans were Hebrews. I'll show you some of that stuff. So when people listen to someone like me and they're like, what has she got to do with slavery? Excuse me, but there's many books about white slavery. Okay, so it wasn't just one race. The so-called 1860s, when the so-called slaves were supposed to be emancipated, a lot of those were so-called Caucasian-looking workers. I mean, look at all these factories in Fall River, big time. Everybody was. My mother worked in these horrific textile mills all the way up until I was ready to be born. No wonder why I'm so hyper and edgy. And she would brag about that like it was cute. Like, really, I had to listen to all those damn machines all day long? Like, no wonder why I don't like too much noise. And there's many books, White Cargo, white slavery in the Barbary states, how many were plucked from North Africa. Look at all the wars during the so-called Civil War was going on overseas in these same areas like Morocco, Algiers. Now, this is just a hop, skip, and a jump from Spain and Portugal, which was colonizing the whole world, which the original Spanish and Portuguese were melanated. And yes, they took on white women and mixed them and stuff, but that doesn't, change the fact that, when you talk about certain topics, people get really inflamed and they think, they believe the mainstream narrative, as it were, and that's not true. Okay, so that's perpetuating a lot of bullcrap between two groups of people. And you can almost see how some so-called white people have a problem with melanated people, maybe because they're harking back to their slave days too. And they already shown in many videos that there wasn't millions and millions of people coming here on ships like they say in those horrific pictures, which was just meant to evoke a emotional response. They've already said those people would have died from diseases. You can't lay people on top of each other like sardines, put them in a boat and think that they're going to survive. Crazy. But this is a great channel. This and Lex Will, he's one of my awesome teachers. So if you, history is something I'm learning too. So I put out what I have, because they have great sources, but I always like to put people on. And I'll put this on my YouTube also. I'm acquainted with these teachers online. I subscribe to their channels, so I learn all the time. I love this one that he did, and he even puts the source, guys, if you want it. Thanks, Lex. He put the source that will give you the actual book that he's reading from, and he did a bunch of videos on this topic. From the source, 10 tribes, like the so-called lost 10 tribes of Israel weren't lost. They were in the Americas the whole damn time. And the so-called Indians that look like they're Asian, they came after. They're not the real American Indian, okay? They're also, I think, considered Canaanites. So you have to know a little bit of biblical history, and you have to have enough patience, because some of these videos are very long. And you have to take a lot of notes. But he was reading from the source, and it says, "In nothing did the civil policy of the Mexicans more closely resemble that of the Hebrews than in their dedicating their children to the temple, and afterwards sending them to be instructed by the master or superior rabbi in the doctrines of their religion and moral and ceremonial laws." Okay, so very interesting. The so-called original or aboriginal Mexicans, and he has like the so-called sometimes he reads it and sometimes he has the bot read it, so I'll just let it play for a second.
Underscore 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 underscore. One Torquemada says the same time in which this offering or purification was made, one of the old men held the child in his arms, whence it is plain that either these people descend from the Hebrews, or that the devil gave them these rites and ceremonies to emulate those with which God honored his people. Certain, however, it is that greater would have been this triumph of the accursed demon if he had, and c. Baron Humboldt remarks, with reference to this passage of the interpretation of the collection of Mendoza, that the Mexican custom of naming children in the presence of 3 other children who were parties to the ceremony was analogous to the Jewish rite of baptizing the proselytes before 3 witnesses. The remaining rites of baptizing the children, and after presenting them with an offering at the temple, seem to be a confusion of Christian ceremonies with Jewish customs and traditions, which, however distant the period, or intricate the manner in which it was effected, the longer we meditate on the religious rites of the Mexicans and the Peruvians, the more we are inclined to believe did actually take place, viz. The colonization of the new continent by the Hebrews. The custom of offering their children at the temple was peculiar to the Jews, and no other nations imitated them in this except the Mexicans. p. 45. 90 Religious observances. Dedicating their children to the military profession was also a religious one. He continues, "I likewise wish it to be noticed, that the devil commanded amongst this vain Indian people, that the first thing a father bid his children do, should be to love and honor their gods." One of the excellent nature, however, of the moral precepts which the Mexican parents inculcated on the minds of their children, the same author is a witness, where, adducing the authority of the book of Ecclesiasticus, in favor of the early education of children, quoting the 7th chapter, page 230, he says, "The Indians strictly fulfilled this doctrine." This doctrine, adds Torquemada, we shall find wonderfully approved amongst the Indians of the territory of New Spain, who not only took care to nourish their children with food and bodily aliments, for the sake of strengthening their bodies, but also with admirable moral doctrines in order to render them rational and proper members of a civil community, and that they might live the life which had been allotted to them as befitted those who possessed minds capable of reason and order, since the doctrines of those Indians are characterized with much prudence and counsel. I will not omit to record their conversations and exhortations to their children.
So it shows you how much similarities between the ancient Mexican culture. So again, just so much, and we just really need to remember this, have an open mind, because we've been lied to so much that when you got somebody saying, hey, maybe the South could have won, in my prior vid, people are like, what? Not understanding who's who, and that we do have a lot of controlling factors in place. If it's not one mandate, it's another. Yeah, that just because it's not so obvious, I mean, this is a brutal system, okay? And it doesn't mean that, just because you see so-called, Joe Biden and the rest of them, don't mean they're not other players behind the scenes pulling the strings, okay? I mean, they showed you Barack Obama, but even behind the so-called white ones, I mean, they answer to certain people. Didn't people see the video of the so-called white pope kissing the feet of the so-called melanated leaders? I mean, what was that about? So to show he himself is subservient, I'll have to find that vid because that was really good. And I like this channel too, Tooth Uncompromised, because she really delves into how the British and the original Irish were so-called melanated, and that, you hear the word Dublin, Ireland, and that dub means black, and you think of the dubstep music. So a lot of times it just, they're whitewashing history to probably give so-called white people, like, trying to cast some type, it's causing more of a problem, because it's like, hey, we had our oppression too, and a lot of us do have mixed DNA, so it's like, whatever, you know what I mean? It's almost like you're just blaming a group of people that are descendants of people that had nothing to do with it, or people that did have something to do with it and made their compromises. But a lot of the descendants are against the system, and a lot of us have a mixed background. My great grandfather had really dark skin, and so like you can see pictures in DNA, and it'll tell you everything you need to know. And so these two channels are great. I'll let you listen to a little bit.
Get the fame. You looking at your computer, Brother Sean? Who is the Get the Fame? What league?
Iroquois.
Iroquois, and I think folks here said Iroquois. Iroquois lead a confederation of 5 Indian nations. So folks that's running around saying there are Iroquois. Oh, okay. You don't understand that was a confederation. 5 Indian nations, including Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, and I may be pronouncing that incorrectly, Cayuga, and Seneca tribes ranging throughout upstate New York rose to prominence, not only in their successful raiding and captive taking from other Indianate tribes, but also by securing a position of neutrality in the French-Indian conflicts. Let me sip my water.
So So New York been the hot spot.
Been on the block. Been on the block. Now, shout out to the brother. He was commenting on one of the podcasts, and him and I were like kind of commenting back and forth because he brought up ODB from Wu-Tang that transitioned on, his relative.
Mm-hmm.
ODB admitted that his family is Indian, and he said that his great-great-great-grandfather, I don't know how many greats back it was an Indian chief.
Mm-hmm.
And this brother and I was talking, and the brother said, I think he said his the name was Cuffy. And we see Cuffy all up and out through the records as being a Black European, part of the colonization, coming from big time money. Now I gotta go back and dig up that video, but I said to the brother, I said, I thought that ODB named Cuffy as his relative, but I didn't want to lie on him for sure. That's why I mentioned it once in passing, but I wasn't for sure.
Yeah, they sacrificed him. Yep, they took him on up out of here. He was saying a little bit too much.
Yeah. And then someone came in the comments behind us and said, well, you know, his family sold Manhattan. I'm like, yeah, because, I mean, he admitted that. He said that his family sold Manhattan. And
I love her passion. So check out this channel. This is going to be more of like a shout out video to some of my historical teachers. I study law. You got to study your history because it's all been a damn lie. They totally changed the characters out. They tell you this character was this color, this character. So, you know, of course it confuses everything, and it drums up all this, like, you know, this hate, this buildup that is misguided between people. Definitely confusions, a lot of chaos agents. Because you'll see certain melanated people doing a lot better than so-called certain white people. It's not just, you know, all skin ain't kin, as they say, because there's the so-called melanated Europeans that came here, did their colonization, and I guess brought, you know, may it be mixed family members that they have, you know, sometimes they get with white women, so-called, and then, you know, their children are lighter. I mean, I had that happen with my situation, with my ex. He'd be considered a so-called Black European, and his family had way more so-called money than my family. They acted very bougie. They were really into the system, and so when people, not sure on BitChute how so-called awake everyone is, but you know, this would be the so-called real American Indian, not what you think, not what we've been told. And there's a lot of great, just look up so-called Black American Indian, but you see, you know, there's a lot of nations together. So pretty. I love the necklaces. Aren't they gorgeous? So pretty. But there's just a lot of very interesting pictures when you go into, but, you know, when you talk about the topic of slavery, I mean, you see people now working for peanuts. I mean, they're working for minimum wage. It's called being indentured servant. And you see both colors doing it, right? And you'll see, you know, different colored taskmasters. You know, you'll see the brown ones and the so-called pale ones, right? And if anybody that comes on here, if you have any history or family from the Azores, because a lot of people were shipped off to the islands too from the mainland in a lot of these places. So I did a little digging to look up some of my ancestry. And it says genetic structure and origin of peopling in the Azores Islands, Portugal. So cool. From the mitochondria DNA. So this is, they, of course, they test everybody. They know who everybody is. So this was pretty cool. It says the Azores Islands, Portugal, uninhabited when discovered by Portuguese navigators in the 15th century, are located in the Atlantic Ocean, 1,500 kilometers from the European mainland. The archipelago is formed by 9 islands of volcanic origin that define 3 geographical groups: Eastern, St. Miguel or San Miguel, that's where my family's from, and Santa Maria; Central, Terceira, Fayal, Pico, Graciosa, and St. George; and Western, Flores and Carvo. To improve the genetic characterization of the Azorean population and to clarify some aspects related to the history of settlement, a study of mitochondria DNA was conducted in the population of the archipelago. The HVRI region was sequenced and specific RFLPs were screened in 146 samples obtained from unrelated individuals with Azorean ancestry, 50 from the Eastern group, 60 from the Central group, and 37 from the Western group. Samples were classified into haplogroups based on the information obtained from both sequencing and RFLP analysis. All the analysis performed support the idea that in the whole group of islands, the majority of mtDNA lineages originated from the Iberian Peninsula, mainly from Portugal mainland. However, contributions from other European populations, especially from Northern Europe, cannot be disregarded. The values obtained from the various diversity parameters in the Azores archipelago indicate that the Azorean population as a whole does not exhibit the typical characteristics of an isolated population. The analysis of genetic data by groups of islands showed that the Western group exhibited particular features. The distribution of haplogroups in the Western group is very atypical, being significantly different from what is observed in the Eastern and Central groups. Furthermore, the diversity values are in general lower than those observed in other populations used for comparison. African haplogroups were found in all the groups of islands. That's interesting, guys. Therefore, the presence of Moorish and African slaves on the islands, as reported in historical sources, is supported by the mtDNA genetic data, especially in the Eastern group. Oh, and the Eastern group, they said, was San Miguel. And so those, we have more Moorish and African DNA. So they already have shown, guys, in a lot of these videos and channels I just showed you, that the original Europeans were melanated. So they could have took, so-called Caucasians from other regions. A lot of things happened. There was a lot of colonization, and, many peoples could have been sent to Europe for whatever reason, right? And then a lot of them, mixed in and things like that. So there was a lot of, migrations going around. So people need to be more sensitive to it, because they think, oh, you see this person of color, they can only come from these regions. And if you see this white person, they can never come from Africa. They can only come from these regions, So they're, we need to just look at what happened in history and how people moved around, okay? And so just really interested in. Obviously, it's interesting enough for them to study it, right? So it shows here that the presence of Moorish and African slaves were, the DNA, it says especially in the Eastern group, see, right here. The presence of Jews in the Central group is also supported. So that could have been the original Jews, right? The melanated ones, maybe. Is also supported by the mtDNA data. Neither historical nor genetic data phylogeography of mtDNA supports the idea of a differential settlement history for the Western group. However, it is represented in the phylogenus as an isolated branch. The effect of genetic drift induced by the reduced population size since peopling occurred has led to a very atypical distribution of haplogroups in this group of islands. We cannot ignore the influence of biodemographic and genetic processes, namely founder effect, genetic drift, migration, and even recent mutational events in the mtDNA lineages of the Azorean populations. Nevertheless, a great part of the variation in the Azorean mtDNA can be explained by the settlement history. This is a great reference. And the Azores has always been a very interesting place. And so for anybody who cares about history, because it's all a big fat lie. So anybody that comes on like, why are you talking about this and that? Well, I like talking about history. If you don't like it, good for you, stay confused. But this was really interesting too. Do you guys ever hear of like a blue mole? I think it's called like a blue nebulous or whatever. You see how like this woman of color has it. And they have like certain, some of those are really crazy looking, but it's literally blue. You ever see that on someone? Well, my aunt had one of those, okay, and she was so-called pale, and I had one on my elbow that I had removed because it was like so annoying. It looked like I had a bit of blue cheese on my elbow. But I came to this reference. This was just strange, and it just shows, it's called the Mongolian Spot, maybe, a study of ethnic differences in a literature review. But I found that these spots were found in 96% of the so-called Negro children, 46% of the Hispanic children, and 9.5% of the Caucasian children. So it's not usually found, I guess, in Caucasian, but yeah, it was pretty prevalent. Like my aunt had it and I had it. So, and in both of the Asian, obviously Caucasian, we got some Asian DNA, sure, but I just found it funny that it's more prevalent in so-called melanated people. So again, we all can be a mixing pot, If you go back centuries, I can do a vid on the so-called German birth certificate they used in Nazi Germany. Like if you literally had one spot of so-called black blood or, melanated blood, like you were not considered, you couldn't be a full citizen. So like a lot of this stuff translates, because like I said, and like a lot of people say, these higher echelon groups, these so-called secret societies, they're all about incest. They screw each other. They're a whole different breed of people. Aside from, the so-called lower class. Look at this. And it's funny, the pictures that come up. Look at this amazing boy's eyes. Oh, the Most High in all his wisdom. Beautiful, beautiful. But when you put blue moles, like all these pictures come up, So it's funny. Just really gets your old thinking cap going. That's all I gotta say. But there's so many books on white slavery. Don't look at it, just so generic. Because obviously they taught us this shit. Man, They put out those movies, 12 Years a Slave. They got all, everybody all emotional, like, oh my God. I mean, that stuff messed me up too. But like I learned from one of my teachers, Lex Will, the one that I just showed you, he has that reference with the 10 tribes of the Western Hemisphere. He even said that, how they were whipping that guy and they were like, like, your name's Toby, not Kunta Kinte. Well, he even said, how many dark guys do you know named Toby? And how many white guys do you know named, like, like Toby Maguire? Like, that's a white boy name. So that kind of hit me too when he said that. And you see a lot of stuff like in the history, they used to use like a whip and like slap your feet. They would whip the soles of your feet, guys. So that's probably why I have so much like angst against being controlled in any way, because I probably have it in my DNA, And you see a lot of people get sent here as servants. And again, if you ever watch the movie, the music video with Boy George, Karma Chameleon, you will see like the so-called dark people with the light people coming here on a ship together, and you got this one guy who is also Caucasian robbing from everyone, and they band together and got rid of them. So that a lot of these videos, guys, show us a lot of truth. And another music video, I think it's from Sister Sister, it's called Breakout, and it shows like this so-called Caucasian woman with a turban on her head being made to work in a factory, guys. And I'm like, that's my mother right there. And she was like, she was all done, she wanted to break out. I'm going to have to do a vid on that. But just those two music videos, Sister Sister with that song Breakout and that Karma Chameleon song, watch that from Boy George. Watch the music video. It shows you they all came here in a ship. It said 18 something. They even felt the need to put the date, right? And it showed that, when you see the Portuguese flag, it's red and green. You see red and green everywhere. Look at the House of Gucci. Red and green. Everything's red and green. And gold, red, gold, and green. And a lot of different nations, a lot of African flags with those colors too. So what's really good? The truth is out there if anybody wants to hear it, because, it's all a lie. We've all been lied to so bad. And, everything is a damn hoax nowadays. The whole system is a damn lie. The only truth, and I know the truth is only becoming memes now. It's all manipulated, but yet we still fall into these narratives about the so-called historical account of the so-called transatlantic slave trade, which many teachers who are more well-versed than I am in this particular topic have already said that is crazy. That is impossible. It didn't happen like that at all. So, give these two channels a listen. I like watch Lex is the one that put me on to Truth Uncompromised. I like this lady because she's a melanated woman and she blows it right open, and she talks about the Black American Revolutionary Wars and what was happened during which date. Okay, and he tells you right here in his he goes into many different videos, but the ones that I titled 10 Tribes Aborigines of the West. Right here, he's reading from the 10 Tribes of Israel, historically identified, let me bring it up, with the Aborigines of the Western Hemisphere. And he tells you what pages they're reading from. That's by Mrs. Simon. And it was so nice to give you the link. And it says 19 points to prove the pre-Mexicans were of the 10 tribes hidden by all European countries, escaping from one empire to be hunted and hidden by another. So this is of biblical proportions. This was told in the Bible. And most people don't even know America is the so-called promised land. They're still trying to think that fake state in Israel that fake place overseas that was made after the fact, that was constructed during the World Wars. Like it was totally just like invented, and they killed half of Palestine to get it. And again, those are all so-called white people. Even there was a Egyptian president who came out saying like they will have no peace because they left black and came back white. So like those are not even the real original people. So people need to wake the hell up, because that fake Israel is getting help from the United States and a lot of countries to bomb and do what they do, and they don't get enough sanctions. It's kind of like everyone follows their lead. And so they take on the name to give like the real Hebrews a bad name, probably, causing more confusion. And they would be referred to as the Revelation 2:9 Jews, those who call themselves Jews but are not, are of the synagogue of Satan. Because even with history, you wouldn't, you see this dude and they keep trying to tell you this is an African American, this is an African American, but a lot of people are waking up realizing, it says he is from the Taino indigenous tribe. A lot of people are reaching back to their heritage, and that was all a lie to try to get the indigenous people, the inheritors of this land, off this land. So that's some bull crap. So that's why I like to expose it, because if I'm going to dash deception, you got to do it across the board. So I hope this was educational, and it just brought more understanding, guys, to maybe some vids that when I do talk about this topic, but I don't go into it, it's because it's very vast and there's other teachers who go into it. So I touch a little bit of it and I let them do what they do, because they're the ones who are better to teach it. You know what I mean? They're the ones of the so-called culture that people are falsely labeling black and saying, hey, that wasn't us, but they were melanated European colonizers, and the original Portuguese and European were people of dark skin. So when they're attributing certain atrocities to the wrong nation or to wrong groups of people, that's disinformation, and that causes a lot of misunderstandings that we're trying to clear up. So I'll talk to you soon, guys, and have a wonderful day.